6 months before my friend's marriage ended, her husband said one sentence at dinner. Not "I want a divorce." Not even a raised voice. Just, "Do whatever you want." She laughed it off. 2 years later, she told me that was the night she actually lost him. She just didn't know it yet. Relationship researchers who've spent decades studying couples, most famously psychologist John Gottman, have found that it's rarely the big fights that predict where a relationship is headed. It's the small, ordinary phrases said in passing, long before anyone admits out loud that something's over. So here are 5 of them, because some part of you may already recognize one. Start with the most deceptive one. "I'm fine," said with a shrug. Flat tone. As already somewhere else. On its own, this phrase means nothing. People say "I'm fine" all the time and mean it. What matters is the pattern around it. Early on, people fight to be understood. They explain. They push. They want you to get it. When that stops and "I'm fine" quietly takes its place instead, it's worth paying attention to. Not as proof of anything, but as a signal. Especially when it comes paired with shorter conversations, less eye contact, faster exits from the room. That's when the phrase becomes more interesting than the words themselves. The second phrase is quieter, but it does something specific. It removes you from the team. You wouldn't understand. Not always said with anger. Sometimes almost gently, like they're protecting you from something, which is exactly why it's easy to miss. But said repeatedly, it can point to a boundary that wasn't there before. "I'm not letting you in on this part of me anymore." Healthy conflict still assumes we. Hearing this phrase once might mean nothing. Everyone has private moments. But hearing it as a pattern, on the same topics, over time, is what actually tells you something has shifted. This one gets mistaken for maturity constantly, for someone finally being chill. It doesn't matter anymore. But there's a real difference between calm and resignation, and they sound almost identical out loud. Calm says, "I worked through this. I'm at peace." Resignation says the same words, but means, "I've stopped expecting this to get better, so I've stopped caring enough to be upset about it." And the phrase itself isn't the evidence. The timing is. If "it doesn't matter" shows up once, it might really not matter. But if it shows up after the same fight has repeated for months with no resolution, that's a pattern worth noticing. Someone may be quietly lowering what they expect from you, and from the relationship. This is the one from the story at the start. And it's the one people misread most. "Do whatever you want." On paper it sounds like trust. Practice. Listen to when it's said. Trust sounds like, "I believe in your judgment, so I'm handing you this." But this phrase, said in the middle of a conflict or after a disagreement, can instead mean, "I don't have the energy to care what you choose." It's false permission. But only when it becomes how someone consistently responds to decisions that used to matter to them. Said one. It might just be trust. Said as a pattern, it can mean the outcome has stopped mattering enough to weigh in on. And that's a very different message. The last one is the most honest, and often the hardest to hear, because there's no anger to argue with, just uncertainty. "I don't know what I want anymore." This isn't necessarily about you specifically. It could reflect uncertainty about the relationship, or confusion about their own life, identity, or emotional state. It's someone standing at a fork in the road, and saying it out loud before they've even decided which way they're walking. Unlike the first four, this one isn't necessarily distant or cold. It can be said with real sadness, which is part of why it lands differently than the others. And as with all 5 of these, it's not a verdict on its own. It's one data point. What it deserves isn't panic. It's a real conversation. None of these 5 phrases are about blame. People don't usually say them to hurt you. They say them because something already shifted inside them, often before they've admitted it to themselves. And none of them said once, "Prove anything." A phrase isn't proof, but a pattern is a signal. And the value in noticing it isn't catching someone in the act. It's catching it early enough to actually talk about it, instead of realizing 6 months later that the relationship ended long before the breakup did. This hit home. Hit like and subscribe. New relationship psychology videos every week. And if you want to know what to actually do once you notice these signs, that's the next video.